Hello and welcome to the video presentation of To Be or Not to Be Graduate and Professional School Edition. Today what we'll talk about is how your undergraduate study might be different from the graduate education that you pursue, some common myths associated with pursuing graduate study, and the types of degrees that you might pursue. There are many different ones out there. Different things to consider when you are thinking about different programs and what you should keep in mind, as well as some of the application pieces that are involved.
Hello, I'm another career specialist at the Career Center, and I'm going to be talking to you about the learning objectives for this workshop. And later at the end, I will speak to you about a really cool new platform that is available to you as a UCR student and beyond that as well when you're an alum. So more on that later. But as for the learning objectives for this workshop, we hope that you'll be able to identify the factors that determine if graduate school is necessary. So depending on what your career goal is, you might not need to go to graduate school. But we can, in the course of this workshop, we'll go over some of the things that you should consider in order to make that determination for yourself, because everyone is different, everyone has different goals. So graduate school isn't necessarily something that everyone needs to do, even if it feels that way. So if you're unsure, hopefully this workshop will help you kind of identify if graduate school is something for you or not. Next is list different considerations when choosing a program. So programs can vary greatly, and we'll go over some of the different things to consider when you're choosing a program. And that's where critical thinking that you'll see at the bottom comes in. Being able to understand, first of all, like, what are the requirements of the program? Do I have these requirements? How can I meet these requirements in my application? And also determining, what way, in which way do I learn best? Which environment do I thrive in? And considering all of those things when deciding on a program. And lastly, we hope that you'll be able to identify and understand all of the different application pieces that you'll be putting into your application. So I already spoke a little bit about critical thinking, but the other NACE career competency that we'll describe in the next slide is career and self-development. So as this pertains to graduate and professional school, deciding to go to graduate or professional school is a huge step in your career development. Again, it may not be necessary for you, but depending on what your career goal is, if you need to go to graduate or professional school in order to attain this goal, then graduate and or professional school is a really important step to take towards your overall career development to achieve that goal.
This is the list of all of the NACE career readiness competencies, and NACE stands for the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and they have surveyed employers who hire recent college graduates, and they ask them, what skills are you looking for? What skills and competencies would you say are important for these graduating students to have that will help them be successful in their careers? And these 8 skills are those competencies that they have highlighted. So as you are going through your time at UCR, hopefully you are taking the opportunities to develop in some of these areas and highlighting them, because again, if you can develop these skill sets and explain them to a potential employer, it will really demonstrate that you are a top-notch candidate. So to dive right in, one of the biggest questions that I get quite frequently is, how is graduate school different from undergrad? And before I dive into this, I did want to highlight that I tend to use the word or the phrase grad school or graduate program, but today we are talking both about graduate school and professional school. And if you are not familiar with the difference, graduate school tends to be more theory-based, so you might see, it might be a master's, it might be a doctoral program, but it might be along those academic side of things in preparing for a career in academia or a career in research. Professional schools, on the other hand, might be leaning more towards a particular career path. So for example, a law school is a professional school, medical school is a professional school. All of them are advanced beyond the undergraduate level, but so they all kind of fall into graduate school, but if you hear me use those terms, that's kind of how I am using them for the context of this workshop. Okay, so how is undergrad different than graduate study? The first big thing is expertise level. So as an undergraduate student, you are developing a broad amount of knowledge in a variety of topics. You're taking general education courses, you're taking deeper dives into your major courses, but generally it's kind of that entry level education, right? You're developing some areas of expertise, but where you really strongly develop that expertise is at the graduate level. So you're going to take everything that you learned at the undergrad and then just go deeper at the graduate level. So that's a huge difference, is that you tend to focus in and you have way less of the general education types of courses. The scope and direction of study, so I kind of talked about the scope where you really focus in at the graduate level. But the direction of study is also important. So at the undergraduate level, your faculty members are really making the call on what it is that you're learning, how you are learning it, what assignments that you have. And at the graduate level, especially if your field involves research and what you're doing is research, you are more likely to have some more say over what it is that you're learning, and because you are developing that expertise. So that's another key difference, is that you have a little bit more control over what you are learning and how you're learning it and what you're adding to the field. Which leads me perfectly into the next statement about what are you expected to deliver upon graduation. And you can speak already to what you have to deliver at the end of all of your courses, or really completing your coursework at the undergraduate level. Maybe you do research, but it's really about completing those classes, and there may not be a comprehensive program unless, if you're an engineering student, you might be doing your capstone. If you are in honors, then you will have your honors capstone. But, for the other students, you may not have that kind of culminating project that is the final thing that says, yes, I have my undergraduate degree. But at the graduate level, you do tend to have kind of that final project that you are expected to deliver. So for some people, it might be an exam that covers all of the content that was delivered throughout the program. Others might have a research project that might take the form of a written thesis or dissertation. And others may have more of a portfolio of all their work. So there are many different things, but there usually is some kind of holistic deliverable or outcome that is expected at the graduate level. Some common myths that are associated with going to grad school is the next topic. And there are a lot. These are just a few, and they're probably the most common that come up amongst UCR students. But one is that a lot of entry-level jobs, particularly in the sciences and psychology and other social sciences, that even the entry-level jobs require an advanced degree. And I think a lot of that is because when we look up chemist, for example, or we look up psychologist, those titles that are most closely related to our majors, those jobs tend to be for someone with the doctoral degree, because that is what that title relates to. And so, sometimes it just means we have to be creative when it comes to what that job title is that we're looking for, because we may not be looking for the right things. So for example, in the sciences, maybe you're interested in something where you're doing research or you're doing lab work. Looking up laboratory assistant positions and research assistant positions, you will find that there are many more of those than there are chemists, physicists, and all those different pieces. So, or all those other majors that you might be thinking of, biologists. So know that if you are a little bit more creative with your job searches, and you can always meet with a career specialist to talk about what those job titles might be to look for, you will often find more than you are expecting that require only the bachelor's degree, because those tend to be those entry-level positions. And then to advance to that title of chemist or psychologist or biologist, that's where you may need to ultimately get a graduate degree, but it may not be to start out your career. Another common myth is that in order to, when you earn a higher degree, then you will make more money. And I wish I could say that this is 100% true, but it is unfortunately not. If you were to speak to, there are some majors where the undergraduate degree will suffice in a very well-paying job. Others where you can seek the terminal degree, that doctoral degree, and you will make less money than most bachelor's degree candidates will make. So it's really about doing the research and knowing what are those job prospects, and also what are the salary expectations. Because for some of you, your graduate school will be funded, and for others, you will go into debt to pursue that graduate degree. So you really want to be mindful of how much you are spending in terms of time, energy, money, and how does that translate? Is that worth, potential, like when you could have been working and making money? Or, sometimes when we're looking at job descriptions, we fall into the trap of that first category where we think, I need to get that advanced degree in order to get the job. But then when in reality, you need experience and an advanced degree in order to get the position that you're looking for. And when we go straight into a graduate program, now we're going to graduate with this advanced degree and no work experience. And it will be very, very challenging to get that job, because in some ways you will be qualified or potentially overqualified for a position in terms of education, but you'll be underqualified when it comes to work experience. And most employers will prefer the experience over the education. Now, again, these are common, and there are specific instances where some of these things may be true. So know that, like, for example, to be a teacher, most of the time you do need to have your credential. If you want to be a doctor, you do in fact need to go to medical school. So this is not true for everyone. I'm just putting out some myths that are associated for other career paths. And finally, another myth is that grad school gives you time to explore careers and explore options. A lot of students, particularly when the economy is not very good and the job market is very challenging, will say, I think I'll go to grad school because I'm good at school. I don't know what I want to do, or the job market is just really tough right now, so I will find a job when I get the advanced degree. Again, we fall into that issue of, you might be overqualified for a position and then you don't have any experience to back it up. You may also find that when you've pursued this degree, you actually don't really like that topic anymore and you wish that you hadn't. So it's really important to think about, what is it on the other side? What is that job on the other side that you want to get? Will a degree actually help? Can you start without getting the advanced degree? And, are you sure that's what you really want? And again, if you have any questions about this, these are great questions to be talking about with your career specialist. So we'll shift into the types of degrees that you can seek. And this is really a sample. So this is not meant to be the exhaustive list of all degree types, because there are many, many of them. But they tend to be categorized into, I'll say, level. So just like a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree, those are two levels of degrees. So the next higher up after an undergraduate degree is a master's level program. And these tend to be 2 to 3 years. Some of them involve research, some of them do not, but you'll see, just like you have Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science, you can see Master of Arts and Master of Science. But there are also some that are more geared towards those professional schools that I was talking about earlier. So Master of Education, an MBA, Master of Public Administration, Master of Public Health. So there are many of them that exist, and they might be focused more on the taking the theory that the researchers are doing and applying it to the field of choice. At the doctoral level, which is sometimes called the terminal degree, the end of the line, you have both academic and professional. So of course you have your PhD. That's what many of your faculty, if not all of them, have, Doctor of Philosophy. And that's purely academic. It is very much based in research. Doctoral programs tend to be anywhere from, if it's a professional, it may be 4 years. So of course, like your MD is 4 years after undergraduate. A doctor of philosophy, a PhD might be 5 or 6 years, depends on if you go to a master's degree first, master's program first. And a law program is 3 years. So they kind of vary based on what it is. But again, you'll see both academic and professional there. And the Juris Doctor, if you are unfamiliar, is the law degree. Now, I mentioned that there are other types. So somewhere between undergraduate and graduate is a certificate type of program. You might see these at the University Extension or other academic entities. And these are kind of specialty topics that, like you might see human resources, for example, where it's not necessarily a full-on degree, but it is a series of courses that are very specialized to a particular topic. There are also postdoctoral programs where after you have earned your doctoral degree, you might find a position where you get to continue your research, potentially teach, but it is really, really emphasizing the research component. And there are some programs that are combinations, and there are as many combination programs as there are degrees. So you may find that there are medical and PhD where you can both be doing research and seeing patients. You can get your combination business and law degree so that so that you might be able to run your own law firm and manage that process. So there are lots of ways that you can be creative in terms of how you combine different graduate degrees. Now, before we move into considerations, another type of program that some of you may look into before going to grad school, if you've decided that you need to go, is a post-baccalaureate program. And post-baccalaureate programs are, they're after undergrad, so after you've achieved your bachelor's degree. And maybe you've worked a little bit of time and you decide, you know what, I really want to go into a different field, but I don't have the education that I need to do it. So if you're a career changer, you might be looking into a post-bac program to expand your knowledge in a certain area. Maybe you're applying to a grad program and you don't have the strongest GPA. And so sometimes a post-bac program can be helpful for that, particularly if your major is not in alignment with whatever that degree program may be. So maybe you decide that you really, really, really want to go to medical school, and you are a CHAS major that you're deciding this your senior year. And so you might look for a post-bac program to make sure that you are getting those prerequisite courses or required courses to apply before you are able to apply for those schools. And finally, sometimes people look to earn a second bachelor's degree, and so post-bac programs can really get them back into the gear of studying and get them prepared for that next level. So things to consider when you're looking at post-bac programs. They're somewhere between undergrad and grad, so they're not considered graduate, but there are typically more in-depth than an undergraduate course. Again, they can be used to take prerequisite courses for graduate or professional programs, and they're typically up to a year in length, but that varies based on the program. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit into program consideration. So now we thought about what it is we're hoping to work towards, and we are excited and we want to pursue graduate study. We know what it is that we're kind of looking for. So how do we choose the programs that we're going to look for? And there are many, many things, and each one of us has different priorities when thinking about a different program. So for some students, cost is the #1 factor. If I can go for free, I'm going for free. If the one that is going to pay the most of my way or is the cheapest or will require the least amount of loans, that is the one thing that they are looking for, and they don't really care about anything else. Others may say, I don't care how much it costs. I want to go to the best school, and I want to go to a school that has the highest ranking. Now here, I do think it's important to highlight that sometimes programs have a different ranking than the whole institution. So for example, UC Riverside is a very well-ranked school. It's, within the top public institutions in the country. It's got great rankings in a variety of different ways. But the graduate program in entomology is actually one of the top programs in the world. So, UCR, we're a great school, but we're not one of the top 5 within the world. But this particular program is. So know that just because a school is really great and it has a lot of prestige and notoriety, that does not mean that that program carries that same quality or prestige. So other people decide, okay, well, cost is somewhat important, the rankings are okay, but what I really care about is finding faculty members who are doing research that I am passionate about. So if you want to do research, maybe you want to look at what are the faculty doing their research in. Is it in alignment or something closely related to what I would like to do research in? Because again, the school can be ranked really, really well, but if faculty members are not doing the research that's even close to what you are interested in, that program will not be a good fit for you because you won't have anybody there who can advise you and mentor you in your area of expertise that you would like to develop. For other students, location is the #1 priority. Maybe they want to be close to family so that they can have that support system when they're in school. Others may say, I want to go as far away as possible, or they want to use this time to earn a degree abroad. There are many different things to think about. So these are just a few, and some of you probably have other considerations, but these are just, again, things to keep in mind as you consider different programs. Some other things, just at the starting point, it can be very overwhelming when just trying to identify what are these programs and how do I get a list together to even start to compare and think about the cost and location and prestige and all of that. So there are certain websites that are actually dedicated to being a list and being a collection of graduate programs. So you can go to websites like Peterson's or gradschools.com, and there will be lists you can search by program area and subject matter and see what are the degrees that are offered or what are the programs that are offered in this area that I would like to study. If rankings is the #1 priority for you, then I would probably start with the U.S. News and World Reports. Those are updated every year, and that's a great way to start identifying programs based on their outcomes that they have. And for some of you, accreditation is something that's going to be incredibly important. And accreditation is essentially a reviewing organization that looks at the school and says, yes, you do teach what you say you teach, and you are, you meet those qualifications. So UC Riverside is an accredited institution as a whole, and they are accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. But each program, and in some areas, certain academic areas do have accreditation. So, for example, medical schools cannot open their doors if they are not accredited in the US. And so if you are interested in other areas, schools may have a program, but it may not be accredited by a reputable organization. So there are lots of different organizations that do this process. So you can Google accrediting body for whatever type of program you're looking at, and you can see, usually it's a professional organization, but they often have lists of schools that are accredited by them, so that can be a good starting place to start to just generate a list of schools to look at. Once we have the list of schools that we're thinking about, now how do we narrow it down? And there are lots of ways that you can do that. One of them is, what's the structure of the program? And the terminology I have up here is cohort model, and cohort is essentially a group of students that start the program at the same time, they end the program at the same time, and they go through their courses together. It's really meant to build a tight-knit community amongst the students, and usually the admissions department will really review the applicants in the context of one another, so that they build a group of students that have something in common, whatever that might be. It's based on the department or based on the program, that will help them gel and become a good study group together. So there are benefits and drawbacks to this model, and these might lend themselves more towards those professional programs rather than graduate, because graduate programs that are very research driven, they might be, it's more individualized because it's your area of expertise, so keep that in mind. But for cohort models, they usually are very structured in terms of courses. So you take, these 3 classes to start, and then the next 3 classes. You may not have a lot of choice in terms of electives that you can take, so that's important to keep in mind. Again, you get a very strong peer network, so if you would like to always have class with the same group of people, very few others that might join, that can be a really great benefit of a cohort-based program for you. Some of us like to work with one group one term, and then the next term we want to meet other people and expand our network that way. And so if that's for you, then maybe not going with a cohort model would be a better fit. So again, you want to just weigh what works best for you. And then of course, the last piece about a cohort model is, well, not maybe the last, there are many parts of being a cohort model, but cohorts, because they are so structured and because it's meant to build that network, they often are the kind of standard time. So if you were to need to take a term off, maybe something's happening in your personal life, or you want to work and do part-time courses, they tend to have less flexibility when it comes to that, because they want everybody to go through it together at the same pace. Other things to think about is this program research-based or application-based? And so every field has more of the research versus applied. So they have different components of them. In terms of the structure in the program, a lot of research-based programs will be based on theory. You are seeking to develop knowledge to contribute to the field, to expand what we know about whatever it is that you are studying. Whereas in an applied program, we're going to look at all the research that exists and we're going to say, okay, how does this impact kind of the day-to-day of how we apply this in the world? So both parts are needed. Research is the one out there exploring and finding new things, and applied is saying, this is awesome, how can we build this into what we are doing in practice? Faculty relationships are a little bit different. So advisors really support in research-driven fields because they are often experts in your field already. So they're kind of helping to point you in the direction of developing your knowledge, potentially, surpassing their knowledge in certain areas. But they're really meant to be that advisor where they're helping you with next steps and thinking about your research and that sort of topic. Whereas in the applied programs, they might be more of a mentor, where they might connect you with other individuals. They might be thinking about that career goal in mind and really connecting you with your next opportunity or an internship in those applied programs. And finally, this is a callback to one of the big differences between undergrad and grad, is that you tend to have that final project, right, that I talked about. So in a research-based program, you tend to have a written final project. So at the master's level, a thesis; at the doctoral program level, a dissertation. And these can be, they're usually several chapters long, so they're very long documents that highlight all of the hard work that you have been doing and really showcasing, what you found and its implications, so that the applied folks, again, can take that and put it into practice. Applied programs tend to have an exam, or perhaps they will have a portfolio saying, here is everything that I did as part of this project, and that will help me to be able to apply for different positions in my post-grad world. Or some people may have an experience-based program at the end, where they need to get kind of like an internship in order to complete their program and really be qualified to do whatever it is that they are wanting to do. Another consideration is thinking about online or on campus. And, if you're looking at this in the fall of 2020, you may be finding that every program is online, but, at some point there will be both online and on-campus considerations to think about. And, now that you all have a term at least under your belt of studying remotely, you can really think about how this impacts you and what works best for you. So you've seen how discussions in class, they might be a little bit more organic. You may not, you might start with one topic and then it just changes based on what it is that, your classmates are saying, and it's very fluid in the classroom. Whereas discussion boards online, they might be a little bit more structured. We tend to have less of that like meandering conversation that you may have in a lecture or in a discussion-based course. So, really be thinking about how do you want to contribute to class and how do you want to interact with your peers if you prefer online or on campus. Access to resources. Historically, online programs, they might have had similar access, but I would say that now that many programs or many institutions are fully online, there are a lot more services that are available to remote learners that may not have been as accessible in the past. So, when you're in person, of course, you have access to all campus resources, to, seeing office hours, going in person to those places, so it's a little bit less formal. And online, again, office hours, they might be virtual. Visiting campus services like the Career Center still available, but just a virtual option. So look, if you are thinking about an online program, and if it's been an online program prior to many campuses moving to remote study, do they have services that are available to students in this online program? Now, of course, if you're online, again, I think this really helps because you do have some experience in this area now. So you can think about, when I'm studying online, of course, if the class doesn't necessarily meet at the same time every week, you have a little bit more flexibility. So if you need to work while you're studying, you can build your study around that time. Of course, some programs, that might have historically been on campus, they might still be very structured and still meet as if they were in person, just through Zoom or some other virtual platform. So that may or may not exist currently, but usually online programs are a little bit more flexible. Motivation, of course, so, when you have to, especially if it's not structured and you can work on it at any time, making sure you are tapped into your own motivation source so that you are accomplishing what it is that you want to do and you're really finding that motivation for yourself. And finally, study space. So, having studied abroad or studied remotely now, you're seeing that you really have to have that designated space where hopefully you have less interruptions, whether that's from family or friends or, anything that might be going on. It's really important to have at the graduate level because it's going to require a lot of concentration, similar to what your undergrad courses are now. But, now that you all have had this opportunity to study remotely, I think that you're even more prepared to think about whether this will work for you in a graduate program or not. And finally, how will we pay for it? So this is the big question, the $1 million question when we're thinking about graduate programs. And there are lots of ways to pay for it similarly to undergrad. So I would say the best case scenario is institutional funding. And this is where internal to the institution, they have opportunities for you to work or earn an income while studying. So many of you have had teaching assistants or TAs, and they often are in their doctoral program, and most will have their tuition and fees covered, or tuition at least covered, maybe or maybe not fees, and then they might be paid a stipend on a monthly basis. So not every program is structured the same, and not every assistantship, whether it's teaching or graduate research, some of them might be paid hourly only. Some of them might be supporting your study and your tuition costs. So if you have questions, I would highly recommend speaking to an admissions officer to talk about what are those funding opportunities. All of the assistant roles tend to have some kind of work component that you have to do in order to earn that income and get that tuition covered if it is covered. But fellowship opportunities also exist. And these might have some kind of responsibility attached, and others might be almost like a scholarship where you are able to get acclimated to studying at this level and not necessarily need to work. So know that there are different requirements and every fellowship is a little bit different. There are scholarships as well. They're less common, I would say, than at the undergraduate level, but they certainly still exist. And just like at the undergraduate level, some are merit-based, so based on your grades, your GPA, your academic achievements, and others might be based more on your needs, so your ability to contribute to the cost of the graduate program. And finally, some of you will have to resort to loans. So if you have undergraduate loans, you may have subsidized loans where while you are in school, you're not being charged interest on those loans. The government is covering that interest, again, while you're in school. At the graduate level, unfortunately, they do not have that option. So they are what's called unsubsidized, which means that the moment that you take out that loan, it starts accruing interest. So keep that in mind as you are considering options. Of course, that might be the only option available to some students, but just something to know that might be different from your undergraduate loans. Okay, so now we will move into the application pieces. And there are lots of different components, and every grad program has slightly different requirements and different application pieces. So on the next couple slides, we're going to talk about what that means to be organized. But generally, you'll see transcripts, your application, exams, personal statements, and letters of recommendation. So transcripts, most of the time when you're submitting your application, it might need to be unofficial, but some will require official transcripts. Even at the application phase. So the big thing here is knowing, one, how to request it, which I believe you can do through your RWeb account now. But leave enough time if it needs to be official to mail it, because it probably will need to be mailed through snail mail or through the postal service, which might take more time than you expect. So make sure that you do plan for that ahead of time. The application, so some programs you apply to the program and that's it. So it's a once and done application piece, and others have both the institutional application and the program application. So you really want to track, do I need to do more than one? What are the components for each, so that you are making sure you're checking off the full list. Know too that some applications do have a fee just to apply. And some are free, some if they charge, they're typically between $50 and $100 each. So it's really something to keep in mind. I get a lot of questions about how many applications should I submit, how many schools should I apply to, and that's really a personal answer for yourself. But if finances are important, then thinking about the costs of applying might have a huge impact on that. Now, exams are also fee-based, so depending on the program, you may not have to take any exams, but you may also have to take one. So for regular or for general grad school, most grad programs would require the GRE. Teachers have the CBEST, medical school has the MCAT, law school has the LSAT, business school has the GMAT. So there is a test for almost everyone. Not every school requires them though, so if you are not a fan of tests, don't have the access to taking it, or for whatever reason don't want to take an exam, you can search for programs and make that a primary consideration, is do they require an exam to enter. Some of them you will not be able to get around it, but others you might be able to. So of course, find the best way to study for yourself. Some of us can study on our own. We can purchase a book. There are courses that you can do, that you can take, offered, through organizations like Kaplan or the Princeton Review. So, find your best study method and follow through on that. Make sure that you take it early enough, because usually at least a month goes by between when you take it and when you get your score. And so you want to make sure that you are leaving enough time before the application is due to get that score and send it off to them. Another fee, as I mentioned, so all of the tests that you have to, if you have to take one, All of the tests have a fee simply to take it. And then some of them may send your scores to a certain number of schools as part of that fee, but then beyond that, you have to pay additional money to send it. So really be mindful of that process. And then to really be thinking about, again, that cost associated, because it can add up very, very quickly. Personal statements are a huge component. So this is where you get to talk about, why are you excited about this program? You know, what kind of things, what are you hoping to get from this program? What are you hoping to, you know, why do you want this program as opposed to other ones? How have you prepared? What classes have you taken? What research experience, what volunteer experiences have you done that really demonstrate that this is the right program for you? If you're not sure what to speak to, because sometimes they have, you know, specific questions that they want you to answer, and other times it's very broad and it just says, write a personal statement. So if you are uncertain about what you should include, you can always ask admissions representatives, how can I really stand out in my personal statement? And sometimes they can give you some really great advice. Highlight, again, the unique experiences or qualities that you bring, and how this program, and specifically this program, will help you reach your career goals. This is the part of an application for you to really speak to, you know, what is special about this program and make them feel very, very special. If you are uncertain of how to do this, or you want to have it looked at, I always recommend that you have multiple people review your personal statement. The Academic Resource Center does provide this service, but of course you can also have faculty members, your letter writers, look at it as well. So try to get as many perspectives on that to make it as strong as possible. Which leads us to our final piece, which is letters of recommendation. And you want to identify people who can speak to your ability to be successful in this program. So who you should ask really depends on the program and what type of degree it is. So for example, if it's a graduate program, maybe a PhD, writers should be faculty members. And sometimes, but most schools will not allow you to get a letter of recommendation from a TA. So it's very important that you build relationships with faculty members, visit their office hours, participate in research with them if you can, really get to know them so that they can write you a strong letter of recommendation when you need it. Sometimes, you know, if you're thinking about medical school or you're thinking about another type of professional school, a letter writer can be a professional in that field. So again, if you're shadowing, if you are volunteering, try to build strong relationships well before you need them so that they can assist you through this process as well. So I realize I jumped to the bottom of this particular one, but once you've identified, you know, who you have very strong relationships with, ask them with a lot of time in advance. So, you know, I would say at least 3 weeks before it's due, you want to ask them to give them time to consider, to write, and give you a really good recommendation. But I would say even earlier than that if possible. Particularly if you might be taking a year off after graduation, you want to ask them even before you leave so that you are still on their mind and you can come back to that later. You may be asked to provide your resume or drafts of your personal statements, or provide highlights of what you want them to cover on their letter. So know that you want to be prepared with whatever they may be asking you for in order for them to write a strong letter for you. Okie doke. So the final piece is to stay organized. And this looks a little bit different for everybody, but you want to find a way to make sure that as you're looking at different programs, you know, identify those areas we talked about in terms of considerations. What do you feel is most important? And can make a list. So know a lot of times it's easy to do this on an Excel document or Google Sheets or, you know, folders on your computer, but have a link to the department website. Have a spot where you can look at all of the application deadlines and know where they're going to fall, because some application deadlines will be as early as September and others might be as late as March. So you want to keep track of, you know, where is the deadline? How many letters do I need? Do I need to take an exam? Have I written my personal statement? all the different components, how much does it cost to apply. So really thinking about that ahead of time will help you to stay organized, not only in the comparison phase, but also in the application phase. It's super important because, some of you might be applying to 10 schools, and that's a lot of information to keep track of. So you really want to find a way to keep yourself on track in a way that works best for you.
Lastly, I wanted to talk to you about the UCR Career Network, which is an online community for networking, mentoring, and job opportunities for alumni and students. It functions very similarly to LinkedIn. Some of the differences are you have to opt in to be part of this network, whereas on LinkedIn, if you put that you went to UCR or graduated from UCR, you're automatically pulled into the alumni network on there. So the people who are here because they want to connect with other people, whether it's alum or current students. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of this platform so that you can connect with people who are working in the field that you're interested in, maybe get leads for a job or internship search and get some advice there. Another unique feature to the UCR Career Network is that you don't have to take it off of the Career Network in order to connect with other people. There is video conferencing call capabilities built into the platform. If you're interested in being part of the UCR Career Network, you can register at careernetwork.ucr.edu.
And that wraps up our To Be or Not to Be Graduate and Professional School edition workshop. And if you have any questions, I highly recommend that you make an appointment with your career specialist. We would be happy to talk about any of the topics that we covered today or any others that have to do with graduate programs. There are many considerations, and everyone has a unique question or unique scenario that they might be facing. So don't hesitate to come see us and talk about your specific interests and how you can start to have the conversation that we started today.